Well, one of the really, I'm a theater and restaurant critic, and the man with me today, Tim Treanor, he's a theater critic too, but he's also a lawyer. And I always tell you, Tim, don't I, that I think you're the best theater writer in town. You know, it's because, as I've said, and I wonder, do you agree? It's because you're a lawyer. And lawyers always seem to be able to write. I guess they're doing briefs and stuff like that.
Well, I got to be honest with you. It's a different sort of writing. But in both instances, we have an obligation to persuade our audience to see what we've seen. And if you don't do that, you can't really write a good argument. You can't write a good review.
No, you wrote a book. We showed it, or we'll show it again, The Seduction of Braulio Jules, and by the great Tim Treanor right here. This is, you wrote me an email about the book and all, and it's so...
Well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Let me sort of set the background.
Yeah.
You know, we baby boomers are entering retirement and starting to make our demands on Social Security. And the money isn't there. I mean, for years, the folks who were working paid in their taxes for the folks who were receiving Social Security. But that's not happening anymore. There's too many retirees and not enough workers. The federal government estimates that between 2018 and 2022, Social Security is going to be about $800 billion in the hole.
That's scary, isn't it?
It gets worse. It gets worse. Normally, that money is supposed to be covered by the Social Security trust account, but all that money has been loaned to the federal government, which in 2023 will be $19 trillion in debt.
I don't know. It's kind of figures like that. It's beyond me.
Yes, it's beyond everyone. It's beyond a solution that doesn't cost something, that isn't painful to people. That is, what could we do about that? I mean, we could raise taxes, or we could cut benefits, or we could do some combination of each.
Yeah.
Or we could kill all the old people. And that's what happens in The Seduction of Braulio Jules. That some decision makers decide that the only way to handle this massive and real crisis is to originate a virus which attaches to the old
people.
Well, it attaches to the old Salk vaccine, which they stopped giving around 1962.
I remember that.
Yeah, the Salk vaccine, that's dead polio virus.
That.
Yes, so did I. We'd be targets.
Yeah.
They've got that polio virus sitting in us.
Yeah.
And this new disease will attach to it. But the story is really about how the central character falls into this, how he becomes complicit in this terrible, terrible scheme. And he does so one step at a time, by not paying attention too closely, by believing flattering things that are said about him.
Are you talking about Braulio?
I'm talking about Braulio, yes.
Braulio Jules.
Braulio Jules.
Where'd you get the name from?
He was named after a horse jockey. His father was a gambler.
Okay.
And Braulio Baeza rode his horse in, got a big payoff, and Gus Jules decided to name his son.
Okay, let me ask you something here, Tim Treanor. You're painting to me a kind of scary picture of the future.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking of these young kids coming up. What are they facing?
They're facing significant problems. And the best way to handle it is to be honest about them. To say in a forthright manner that these problems aren't going to go away all by themselves. We're going to have to do something. And what we're going to do, that's going to cost something. We may have to raise taxes. We may have to do without the things that we've come to expect. I'm not carrying a brief for one solution or another. All I'm saying is that we have to be honest about it. You know, I quoted a poem at the beginning of the story. It's a segment from W.H. Auden's poem, August 1st, 1939. And it goes, "All I have is a voice to undo the folded lie. the sensual lie in the brain of the romantic man in the street, and the lie of authority, whose buildings grope the sky. There is no such thing as a state, and no one exists alone. Hunger allows no choice for the citizen or the police. We must love one another or die. And that's really the sort of choice which now faces us, that we have to admit our problems, admit our shortcomings, and resolve to solve them.
I'd like to vote for you for President of the United States. Did you ever think of running?
Well, you know.
I like the way you think.
Yeah, I don't think I'm on the top of anybody's list yet.
You're on top of mine.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'll campaign here on the television for you.
Well, you know, these are the things that keep me up at night. I suppose there's something that keeps everybody up at night. But I just, almost more important than talking about this problem, is talking about how we run away from it, how vigorously we run away from problems in our lives, confrontations in our lives, how easily we believe that there's some happy solution around the corner. You know, that was really Othello. That was really Iago's scheme in Othello. He told people what they wanted to hear; they'd believe it, and he got away with an awful lot of preposterous things. Well, we're all like Othello, or Iago's other marks. We're all listening to lies and believing them because it's what we want to hear. We have to wake up. We have to be honest with ourselves. And
if you could revise our government, really, just say you could do what you want, would you do something with Congress?
No, I wouldn't revise our government at all. If our challenge is to revise our character. I'll tell you what government is. Government is responsive to us. If we demand sacrifice, if we demand seriousness, we'll get it. Those guys will do what we tell them to. They do it now. But we don't pay attention. Let me tell you a story from my own experience in politics many years ago. I worked for a state senator. I'm not going to give you his name because he was a good guy, but he did some foolish things. And one foolish thing that he did was that he bought a large pleasure boat. And to avoid paying sales tax, he set up a Delaware corporation and had the corporation buy the boat and so on and so forth. And there was a terrible big scandal. And there was a young, successful politician in his district decided to run a primary against him. So we were very worried, especially when this opponent put out a brochure which said 3 good reasons to vote against the senator. And one, of course, was the boat. And the next one was he would fall asleep during the death penalty debate, which he did, unfortunately, tend to do. And I forget what the third one was. But it was a devastating brochure. And they sent it out to the most likely voters in our district. So we were very worried. And so the next day, I made some phone calls to people on that list. And the first guy I reached, I said, "Hi, I'm Tim Treanor. I'm a friend of the senator." And the guy said, "Oh, yeah, the senator. He's the guy with the 3 good reasons. I'll vote for him."
I'll vote for him.
Yeah. So that's the level of attention we pay to our politics, and we pay the price for it.
Well, you're obviously not optimistic about the future.
Well, I'm optimistic enough to write a book, to write a story about it. And the story is kind of a cautionary one. It's a story about what happens when no good person does anything to reverse the course of events. But that doesn't mean that that's what reality is going to be. I hope that it's not. I mean, George Orwell, he was an optimist. He wrote 1984, hoping that it would turn out much differently, and it did.
Yeah.
And part of the reason it did was the book 1984. I don't expect to have that sort of impact, but I do hope to stimulate people to think.
Being on this show, I mean,
I'm going to have more impact than I've had so far.
This will do it. How come you did fiction and not do the same idea on nonfiction?
Well, I'll tell you, nobody likes to be preached at. I'd say that after having preached for about 5 minutes on your show. But people like a story, and I'm no different than anybody else. People like a story because it helps them to understand things in ways a lecture doesn't. This is, I think, a kind of exciting story and kind of a funny story.
It is.
Thank you. Thank you. I've gotten a lot of very good reviews on Amazon from readers.
Good.
And a couple of them have compared it to House of Cards, which is great because some people have compared House of Cards to Shakespeare. So by inference, Anyway, it's House of Cards does us a favor by making us look at the way we govern ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's better than a lecture on that subject. It's better than 100 folks saying that Congress is dysfunctional, because it takes us inside the bowels of a political operation. Mm-hmm. And I think every writer of fiction tries to do that. I certainly did.
Now, you say another book is coming out in August?
Yes, this is actually a 3-part series. The Seduction of Braulio Jules takes us through the initial contact, the development of this horrible virus, the identification of Braulio as the person in whose body it has to be incubated to be affected, and the way that he is drawn in to the inner circle. But there's more. There's the culmination of the plot. There's the assault on older people. And there is a way that we eventually fight back. And that's not an easy story to tell in only 200 pages.
How long did it take you to write that?
Well,
I realize you stop and put it down. Yeah. You got your lawyer stuff going, but
I will tell you, the first time I thought about this was in 1988, because we've known about this problem for that long and for longer. But in terms of really putting my nose to the grindstone, I'll say I've been working on this for nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
I've worked with writing groups. I've taken classes in the Writing Center. I've worked with some very dedicated and talented other people like me who've got stories they want to tell, and we compare notes and work together.
Well, I can tell you this. I've had people over these years, over the last 20 years, say to me, Rich, because I got a million stories. I can't get into it now. A million stories with celebrities I've known and going back to the early 60s and things like that. They say, Rich, you got to write a book about that. And I just don't know how to start. I just don't know how to do it. But I've had too many people tell me, you should write a book about your experiences.
Let me tell you, Rich, none of us...
We have about a minute left, Tim.
None of us writers are great. What's great is our stories. If you have a story to tell, sit down and tell it. If you desire to have your voice and your experience reach your audience, sit down and tell it. And don't take no for an answer to yourself.
Well, Tim Treanor, with The Seduction of Braulio Jules, and you say where you can get this book everywhere?
You can get it online anywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I have a couple of links in my website. But really, any online bookstore.
There it is. Thank you, Tim, so much.
Thank you so much, Rich.
It's a pleasure.
This has been great.